Welcome to HFY Alien Stories, the channel where humanity punches back against the universe, where one human, one moment, one impossible choice changes everything. If you believe humans are worth fighting for, subscribe to HFY Alien Stories right now. Hit that bell so you never miss a single story, because tonight, a girl from the stars landed in the wrong desert and met the most stubbornly brilliant human she had ever seen. This is her story, and she never wants to leave. The Sonoran Desert does not care about you. It does not care about your plans, your timeline, your civilization. It bakes everything under a sun so brutal that even the rocks crack. Lizards hide before noon. Snakes sleep underground until dark. And the sand, that fine red gold sand, it gets into everything. Your boots, your eyes, your soul. Marcus Hawley knew this desert better than he knew most people. He had been coming out here since he was 9 years old, following his grandfather across the cracked earth, learning the names of plants that had no business surviving, learning that survival was not about strength. It was about stubbornness. His grandfather used to say, "Marcus, the desert does not kill the weak. It kills the ones who quit." Marcus never quit. Not when his father left. Not when the garage business went under. Not when the bank took the truck. He was 26 now, driving a borrowed pickup with a cracked windshield, heading out to the old Navarro property where they said the water pump had died. It was just past 4 in the afternoon. The sky was that impossible Arizona blue, deep and clean and completely empty. Except, it was not empty. Not anymore. He saw the light first. A streak of white gold fire tearing across the upper atmosphere. Too slow to be a meteor. Too fast to be a plane. Too low, way too low. What in the... He hit the brakes. The pickup slid sideways on the gravel road, dust exploding around the tires, and he watched, mouth open, engine running, as something the size of a city bus screamed across the sky and slammed into the desert floor. 3 miles ahead, maybe less. The impact shook the ground. He felt it through the steering wheel, a low, deep boom that rolled across the flats like thunder without clouds. Then silence. The desert went completely quiet. No birds, no wind, just the ticking of his engine cooling. And the smoke, a thin column of silver-white smoke rising from behind the mesa. Marcus sat there for 4 full seconds. Then he did what Marcus Hawley always did. He drove toward it. The craft was remarkable. Not because it was alien, though it absolutely was. It was remarkable because it was still mostly in one piece. It had come down at a shallow angle, skipping like a stone across the desert floor, leaving a trench of torn earth 200 feet long, burning sage and shattered rock on either side. The ship itself was wedged nose first into a low sandstone ridge, its rear end tilted up at a 45-degree angle. It was maybe 60 feet long, 20 feet wide, shaped like a flattened teardrop. The hull was some kind of silver-white material that had no visible seams, no rivets, no panels, just smooth, continuous surface that somehow looked both ancient and impossibly advanced. Parts of it were glowing, a faint blue-green pulse running through channels in the hull like veins. Other sections were dark, scorched black, and one entire panel near the rear thruster assembly had simply ceased to exist. There was a hole the size of a refrigerator, edges melted, curled outward, and from somewhere deep inside the craft, a sound like metal grinding against metal. Like something struggling, Marcus stopped the truck 50 feet back, sat there, brain running through options at impressive speed. Option 1, drive away and call nobody because nobody would believe him. Option 2, drive away and call somebody and watch his life become a government circus. Option 3, he grabbed his toolbox from the back of the truck. Option 3, it was. He had taken maybe 10 steps toward the ship when the hull cracked open. Not broke, not exploded, cracked. Like an egg. A seam appeared in the smooth surface, a perfect oval shape, and the material folded inward and upward in a motion that made no mechanical sense. And she fell out, not stepped, not walked, fell, tumbled from the opening and hit the desert floor hard, landing on her hands and knees in the red dust. And Marcus stopped, because nothing in his 26 years of stubbornly surviving the world had prepared him for this. She was. He could not finish the thought. She looked up. Her eyes were gold, not brown with gold flecks. Not hazel catching the light. Gold. Warm, deep, molten amber gold. Like looking into something that held its own light. Her skin was a rich warm brown with the faintest undertone of amber, as if the desert sun had gone into her somehow. Her hair was dark, almost black, pulled back roughly in a way that had not survived the crash. Loose strands falling across a face that was almost human, almost. The antennae were the first difference. Two small, delicate things rising from just above her temples, maybe 4 inches tall, curved slightly forward. Their tips glowing very faintly blue. They were twitching, like a cat's ears when it hears something unexpected. The second difference was the suit. Silver white, form-fitting, covered in faint circuit line patterns that still pulsed with that blue-green light. Though several sections near her left shoulder and right hip had gone completely dark. She was breathing hard. Her hands were pressed into the desert floor. Fingers spread, and she was staring at Marcus Halley with an expression he recognized immediately, because he had worn it himself. The first time he saw how bad the garage's debt really was. The first time he understood his father was not coming back. It was the expression of someone whose entire plan had just become dust. She said something. It was not English. It was not any human language. It was a sequence of sounds that hit Marcus somewhere behind his ears and made the fillings in his back teeth hum slightly. But the tone was universal. She was saying, "I am in serious trouble." Marcus looked at her, looked at the smoking wreck of her ship, looked at the empty desert in every direction. He set down his toolbox, crouched to her level. "Yeah," he said. "I can see that. You hurt?" She stared at him, the antenna tilted forward, both of them, pointing directly at him like small curious fingers. She said something else, shorter this time. He did not understand a single sound of it. But one antenna dipped slightly, and he got the impression, somehow, that the answer was, "A little." "Okay," Marcus said. He stood up, picked up his toolbox, and walked toward her broken ship. "Let's see what we're working with." Marcus was a mechanic. He had been working on engines since before he was legally allowed to. His grandfather's tractor, his neighbor's a TV, every broken-down vehicle that showed up at the garage. He understood machines the way some people understood music, by feel, by sound, by the language of things that wanted to work, but couldn't. The alien ship was an education. He spent 40 minutes walking around it, examining what he could reach. She followed him, at first from a distance, hovering near the hull, occasionally touching panels and looking at readings on a small device strapped to her wrist. Then closer, drawn in by what he was doing. Because Marcus was not panicking, Marcus was not running, Marcus was not pointing and gaping, Marcus was working. He had pulled a small LED flashlight from his toolbox and was shining it into the blown-out panel near the rear thrusters, making sounds, the quiet sounds of someone diagnosing a problem. Yeah, okay, that's interesting." She came up beside him and looked into the same hole. He glanced sideways at her. "Your primary drive housing," he said. He did not know if she understood, but he kept talking because talking helped him think. "Something blue cracked the casing here, see this? The heat damage radiates outward from this point. Whatever failed, it failed fast. You were probably already past the point of controlled landing when it went." Her antennae were pointing straight at him. She tilted her head. "You're lucky it didn't take the whole rear section," he continued. He moved his flashlight to a secondary component nearby, a cylinder about 3 feet long and 4 inches wide, seated in a housing that had partially collapsed. The cylinder itself was cracked. Running the full length of it was a fracture maybe a 1/4 inch wide. "This," Marcus said, he pointed. "This is your problem, right here. Everything else is secondary damage, but this cracked first, and when it cracked, it let pressure into a system that was not designed to handle pressure, and that blew out your primary housing, which is why you fell out of the sky like a well." He gestured at the trench they were standing in, like that. She was staring at the cracked cylinder, then at him, then back at the cylinder. Her antennae were doing something complicated, rotating slowly, independently, in opposite directions, which Marcus would later learn meant she was thinking very hard. She spoke 3 short words and pointed at his toolbox. Here's what Marcus Holly had in his toolbox that afternoon. 2 adjustable wrenches, 3 screwdrivers, a set of hex keys, electrical tape, black and red, pliers, needle nose and regular, a tube of quick-setting epoxy that was mostly used up, wire cutters, a small socket set, a flashlight, and, at the very bottom, slightly squashed, a half-used roll of heavy-duty duct tape. He looked at the cracked cylinder. He looked at the duct tape. He looked at her. She was watching him with those gold eyes and those tilted antennae and an expression that, well, in any language, in any galaxy, that expression meant, "You cannot be serious," Marcus said. "The crack is clean. It's not spiral. It's not multi-fracture. It's one linear fracture under compression stress, which means if we can reinforce the exterior surface and restore the original tension profile of the housing, we might be able to rebuild enough internal pressure to get the secondary systems back online. I don't know what your cylinder is made of, but if I can bond to the exterior surface, I can give it enough lateral support to function. Probably," he paused. "This might not work." He paused again. "But neither does sitting here." She looked at the tape. She looked at him. The left antenna dipped forward very slightly, in a gesture he would come to recognize as, "Fine, but I want it on the record that I have doubts." Marcus got to work. It took 2 hours, not because the application was complex, but because he had to learn the shape of the housing, understand the stress points, and apply the tape in a way that would actually reinforce rather than just cover. He used every inch of the roll, overlapping, crossing, building up layer by layer. She sat on a rock nearby and watched. At some point she pulled something from a compartment in her suit and ate it, and watched him eat. And then she held out a second piece toward him with an expression that said, "It won't hurt you probably." He ate it. It tasted like warm honey mixed with something that had no comparison in any human kitchen. He finished the tape job, stood back, examined it, turned to her. "Okay," he said. "Let's find out." The cylinder held, not perfectly, not forever, but enough. When she moved back inside the ship and began working the controls, things began to happen. The dark sections of the hull started to glow again. First faintly, then stronger. The grinding sound stopped. A new sound took its place, low, resonant, like a chord played on an instrument built from mathematics rather than wood, beautiful and deeply unsettling at the same time. She came back out, stood on the ramp, and said something to him. Long this time, 6 or 7 words. And then she did something surprising. She bowed, not a casual nod, a real bow, deep and deliberate, the antenna dipping forward with her head. Marcus scratched the back of his neck. "You're welcome," he said. She straightened, looked at him, looked at the ship, then looked out at the desert. The sun was setting now, the sky running orange and red and deep purple, the kind of sky that made even non-sentimental people stop and just look. She stopped and looked, and something in her face changed. Not the emergency expression, not the calculating expression. Something quieter, something that looked a great deal like wonder. Marcus stood beside her and looked at the same sky. "Yeah," he said. "It does that." She should have left that night. Her ship had partial power, enough for diagnostics, enough for navigation, enough probably to reach the upper atmosphere and call for assistance. She did not leave. Marcus did not ask why. He drove his truck to the far edge of the trench, close enough to keep the headlights aimed at the hull so she could work. And he sat on the hood and handed her tools when she asked. She learned to ask, not in words. She would appear at the edge of the ramp, look at his toolbox, and do something with her hands that was unmistakably, "Do you have one of these but smaller?" Or, "I need something that applies torque," or "Give me that flat thing." No, the other flat thing, that one. They worked until midnight, at which point she sat down on the ramp next to his toolbox, looked at the star-thick sky, and said something very quietly. He could not understand the words, but the tone was the tone of someone very far from home, looking at the sky and doing the math on how far they still had to travel. Marcus sat down on the other end of the ramp. Neither of them spoke for a while. "I'm Marcus," he said finally. He pointed at himself. "Marcus." She looked at him, tilted her head, said something that started and ended with sounds no human mouth was designed to make. "I'm going to call you Kale," he said. The left antenna dipped. which he had already learned meant objection noted and overruled by practicality. "Kale it is." She looked at the sky again, said one word. Soft, careful, like she was trying on something new. "Marcus." It sounded completely different in her voice. It sounded like it meant something more than a name. He looked at the sky too. "Yeah," he said. She did not leave the next morning either, when Marcus came back just after sunrise. She was already outside, sitting cross-legged on the desert floor, holding a rock in both hands and examining it with the focused attention of someone who had never before held a rock and found this fact surprising and worth investigating. She looked up when he arrived. The antenna rose. This meant something good, he had figured out. Something like, "Oh, you came back. I said I would," he told her. She looked at him a moment, then back at the rock. Then she held it out to him. An offering. He took it, looked at it, handed it back. "Sandstone," he said. "About 270 million years old. Give or take, you're holding time." She looked at the rock differently now, turned it slowly. Her expression had shifted into something he recognized from his own face in the mirror. That particular focused wonder of someone who has just understood something that changes the scale of everything around them. He brought coffee that morning, 2 cups. He handed her one. She examined it, smelled it. The antenna went in opposite directions, which he had come to understand as uncertainty mixed with curiosity. She drank. Her expression was very complicated. "It grows on you," he said. "By the 4th day, the ship could fly, not perfectly, not safely for deep space, but it could break atmosphere. She could reach a point where her people could find her." Marcus knew this because she showed him, brought him inside the ship for the first time, led him through corridors that smelled like ozone and something sweet he could not name, past walls that displayed information in light patterns he could not read, into the cockpit, where she pulled up a display and showed him. He did not understand the symbols, but a ship that flies is a ship that flies, and the system she pointed to looked alive and active. "You can go," he said. She looked at him, did not respond. He said it again, gesturing at the controls. "You're fixed, you can go home." She turned back to the display, said something quiet. He waited. She touched a symbol on the screen and brought up something new, an image of a planet. Vast and ringed and impossibly beautiful, shot through with storm systems the size of continents. Her home, he understood. Then she touched another symbol and brought up something else. An image of the desert, taken from above, small and brown and absolutely surrounded by nothing. She looked at him, pointed at the second image, said one word, just one, and though he could not understand the language, he understood the meaning she was saying. But this, it was the small things that kept her. That was what Marcus realized over the following days. It was not the grand gestures, not the sweeping landscapes, it was the small things. The ones he had stopped seeing because familiarity makes invisible what wonder once revealed. The way the desert smelled after a brief afternoon rain. That particular wet stone, sage and earth smell that rose from the ground like a long-held breath finally released. She had walked into it and stood still with her eyes closed and her antenna spread wide and her face turned up to the wet air. And she stayed like that for 4 full minutes. He had never seen anyone experience rain like that. Like it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. He had just forgotten. She made him remember. The sound of wind through the high rocks at night. She sat outside the ship and listened to it for 2 hours one evening, head tilted, antenna tracking the changes in pitch as the wind shifted through the canyon formations half a mile away. When he asked, she moved her hands in a way that said, "Your world sings. Did you know that? Your world sings constantly, and you do not even hear it anymore." He heard it that night. He lay on the hood of his truck and listened. And she was right. The coyotes at dawn. She had flattened herself against the hull of the ship the first time she heard them, antenna pressed back, eyes wide. But then she had listened to the full conversation of it, the call and response, the way sound traveled across the empty miles. And she had made a sound herself, low, resonant, back in her throat, harmonizing. One of the coyotes had actually paused and called back. Cale had turned to Marcus with an expression of such pure, undiluted delight that he had laughed. And she had turned that same expression on him, this time aimed at his laugh. Like that too was a sound worth keeping. On the 7th day, something changed. She came to the truck where he was drinking his morning coffee, and she sat beside him, and she held her wrist device out toward him. She pressed something, and it said, in English, a little rough, the rhythm slightly off. Like music played in the wrong tempo, but recognizably the same song. I have been learning your sounds, the device assists. I wanted to say, thank you properly. Marcus stared at the device, stared at her. You've been learning English for a week? Your language is not difficult, she said, through the device. Then the antenna dipped in that way that meant doubt about her own statement. Some of it is difficult. The words you use for time, yesterday, and tomorrow, and soon, are very imprecise. My language uses 17 different words depending on whether the time has already changed the situation or merely threatened to. We only have 3. Marcus said, yes, she said. I know, I do not know how you plan anything. He laughed. She watched his laugh with that same collecting attention. What is funny? She asked. You, he said. You're funny. You just told me my entire language is bad at time, and you said it like a professor correcting a paper. That's funny. She was quiet for a moment. Then, through the device, much more carefully, she said, my people have a word for someone who shows you what you have stopped seeing. We say they are I do not know your word for it, a window cleaner. For the part of you that looks at the world. You are that, Marcus Halle. You make things visible. I did not expect to find a window cleaner in a desert, with tape. He was quiet for a long time. Duct tape, he said finally. It's called duct tape. The left antenna dipped. I will remember this word. She told him on the 9th day. Her people had tracked the crash site. They were sending a recovery vessel. It would arrive in 4 days. She told him this sitting on the rock where he had first seen her fall. Watching the horizon, the antenna flat and still, which he had learned meant she was feeling something she had not found words for yet. They'll fix the ship properly, he said. Yes. And you'll go home. She was quiet. I thought you'd be relieved, he said. To go home after all of this. She turned to look at him. The antenna rose slightly. I have been thinking about your word, home. What about it? In my language we have 2 different words, one for the place your body comes from, and one for the place yourself belongs. In your language they are the same word. I wonder if that is because for most of your people, they are the same place, or if it is because you have not yet understood they are different. Marcus looked out at the desert, the red rock and the endless sage and the sky that seemed bigger out here than anywhere else on Earth. He had been born 40 miles from this spot. He had never really thought about leaving. Had never needed to. The desert had always been enough. Until now he was sitting next to someone for whom the concept of enough had just become complicated. Which word applies to here? He asked. She did not answer immediately. The antenna turned slowly in opposite directions, that deep thinking motion. Then she said, both. That is the problem. Both words now point to 2 different places, and I do not know how to. In my language we say, to be star-torn, to be pulled toward 2 suns at once. I am star-torn, Marcus. I am star-torn, and it is, a little bit, your fault. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that the shadow of the mesa moved 2 inches across the desert floor. Then he said, you know what I've fixed with duct tape over the years? A water pump casing on a 1987 Ford. A cracked manifold on a 2-stroke engine. A friend's broken guitar strap at the worst possible moment. This one time a dog got into a fight with a cactus and somehow duct tape was the solution. Don't ask. And now a spaceship from another solar system. The running theme, I think, is that duct tape is not a permanent solution. It's a whole dash it dash, together dash, until dash we dash figure dash out dash the dash real dash answer solution. So maybe what we have right now is duct tape time. It holds, it works, it gets us to the next step. And the next step we figure out when we get there. She looked at him. That is either very wise or very foolish, she said. Usually both, he said. With me, usually both. The left antenna dipped. I know this about you already, she said, and for the first time since the crash. She smiled, a real one. The kind that changed her whole face, that made the gold eyes brilliant. that made the antenna rise straight and high and quiver slightly at the tips. He had fixed her ship with duct tape, and now she was smiling like she had found something worth more than the ship, worth more than going home. The recovery vessel came on the third day, a day early. It was enormous, 3 times the size of her ship, silent, descending from a sky that had no idea how to process it. It landed 200 meters away, and Marcus felt the weight of it in his chest like a second heartbeat. 3 figures came out, her people, taller than her. Same amber skin and golden eyes, same delicate antenna. All 3 stopped when they saw Marcus. Then their antenna all tilted in the same direction, toward Kale. And something was communicated that Marcus could not hear. Kale walked forward and spoke to them, at length. Her antennae were moving constantly. Expressive, rapid, telling a story his ears could not follow but his eyes could read the shape of. She was saying something important, something that mattered. Once, she turned back and looked at him, her eyes steady and clear, and he got the sense she was saying his name in a language that had never held it before. Making a space for it, the conversation went on for 11 minutes. Then the 3 figures looked at Marcus again. One of them, the tallest, walked toward him, stopped 3 feet away, looked at him for a long moment with those impossible golden eyes, then bowed, exactly the way Kale had bowed. That first evening in the desert, deep and deliberate, Marcus bowed back, because it was the right thing to do. Scene 15. What she chose to stay for 6 more months. That was the agreement. Her people would study Earth with her permission and her guidance. Marcus would not be the only human who knew. Others would need to be told carefully, slowly. There was a process, apparently, a galactic process for this kind of thing. First contact protocols, hundreds of years old. But Kale had argued for an exception that looked a great deal like a human mechanic with a borrowed truck and a half-used roll of duct tape. She told him what she had argued that evening, sitting outside under the stars that she could name every single one of. I told them you already knew, she said. And you did not panic, you fixed things. I told them your world needs to know it is not alone, and that the right person to begin that knowing is someone who responds to impossible problems by opening a toolbox, someone who understands that being star-torn is just another way of saying you belong in 2 places, and that this is not a tragedy. This is a very specific, remarkable kind of luck. Marcus looked at the stars for a long time. 6 months, he said. To begin, she said. And then? And then, she said, we figure out the next step. This is duct tape time. You said so yourself. He laughed. She had been learning to laugh too. She did it now. Her version, lower than his, resonant. The antenna vibrating gently at the tips. The desert was quiet around them. The coyotes were singing somewhere to the east. The stars were out in force, every one of them blazing. Kale tilted her face up and named them quietly, one by one, in a language that was older than any word Marcus had ever heard. He listened, and somewhere out there, in the dark beyond the farthest one she named, something was coming, not rescue, not danger, something that had no word yet in either of their languages, something they would have to name together when they got there, Channel Outro. That is where we leave them tonight, in the desert under the stars. 2 people from 2 different suns, learning each other's language 1 word at a time, and figuring out that home and belonging are not always the same direction. If this story hit you somewhere real, if you want to know what comes next, comment right now and tell me, should Kale stay or should Marcus go with her? Subscribe to HFY Alien Stories so you do not miss part 2. Hit that bell, because the universe is bigger than any of us expected. And the next story starts very soon. This is HFY Alien Stories, where humans are never, never as small as the universe thinks.